This lady is someone I remember meeting and never quite forgot. It was when I took my first foray into networking. I'd always done conferences and networked as a corporate employee, but never on my own. And I walk into this room, and it's a room full of white collar men in suits, looking very important. And there's this one woman, and guess who's in charge? And she fascinated me. And from that day until this, she's been a great source of inspiration, a good friend when you need someone in business. And she doesn't realize it, but she's actually taught me quite a bit. So today, this lady, what she does for people, listeners like you, is she specializes in getting small and micro businesses, freelancers and self-employed individuals to live up to their true business potential. As a successful small business owner herself, Kathy is the first to admit that it didn't come without its trials and tribulations. This is why she's passionate about sharing her knowledge and experience with others, so that their businesses will become everything they ever dreamed of. Every small business wants to get new clients and make more profit without taking up lots of money or loads of time. Sound familiar, people? As a mentor, consultant and trainer, Kathy helps people start and expand their business, embed growth, building systems and processes into their company through effective business planning, promoting their organization through brand and marketing methods to increase customer engagement. She also helps them develop better business networking, like for me. She helps them do public speaking. This woman has no end to her talents, presentation skills, and she can help you improve your communication and business relationship building skills so that your confidence and self-esteem raises. And then you can utilize your personal brand in a process of communicating through your appearance and your behavior, which is really what I know her for. I am so stoked to introduce my guest today, the wonderful package of energy that is Kathy Ennis. Hello, Kathy. I hadn't forgotten you. I was getting to you. It was just all these attributes getting in the way.
Thank you, Georgette, for that wonderful introduction. My head is bigger than my screen at the moment. So thank you very much for that. Blushing away.
Oh, good, good, good. Now, before we get into your business side, I want people to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, with a few little silly questions, and just to find out what your tastes are. So,
Okay.
because you're a similar age to me, this one will relate to you. So, who would you choose, Clark Gable or Errol Flynn?
Oh, Errol Flynn.
Oh, me too. Covered it. Rihanna or Beyonce?
Beyonce.
Okay. Are you an executive saloon person or a sports car?
Um, I'm definitely not a sports car. No. I want something that I can climb up into rather than have to fall down into. So definitely some kind of saloon,
And
preferably a Jeep, I think.
oh yeah, yeah. I alternate because I'm short, so I look really
Oh,
silly in big cars, but I like big cars. Go figure.
well, in little cars, I look like Inspector Clouseau in the cartoon Panther.
And
So no, definitely big cars for me.
oh, all right then. Okay, we go with that. Dead or alive, what two people would you most love to meet?
Oh, Stephen Fry
Okay.
is somebody I've always wanted to meet, and an author who I've read ever since I was a kid, somebody called Georgette Heyer.
Oh, I know her very well. Romance person. I mean,
Yeah.
and not including Richard Branson. Who do you admire in the business world right now?
Oh, goodness me, that's really interesting. I think one of the people I admire most is Emma Jones from Enterprise Nation,
Okay.
because she is doing an awful lot on behalf of small businesses, and particularly the kinds of small businesses that I tend to work with.
All right. And this one, because it's a question that it relates to me, because when you've got family, you have your home, and a whole
Mm.
day to yourself. There's no unfinished tasks. You don't have to go on your PC or anything. How would you spend it?
Probably watching a box set on Now TV.
What would you watch?
Oh, something crimey, with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. At the moment, I'm catching up on Elementary, which is a reworking of the Sherlock Holmes stories. The other thing I really like is something called Blacklist.
Okay. So you think you'd like me the romance stroke the crime, though I don't get much time for the. But if I pick them, I go for the crime because I'm fascinated by
Yeah, yeah,
plot
not so much
lines.
the romance. I like the comedy bits and those kinds of things, but I do like the crime things and anything espionage.
Mm, mm, okay. So an Errol Flynn lover likes big cars and crime. Okay, fair enough. All right, got an idea. Okay. So how did you come up with your business name? Because that's one of the things that stumps a lot of people when they start out, and it takes on many incarnations. So have you got the same name you had when you started? And how did you
Um,
come to the one that you decided upon?
well, my actual business, I'm a limited company, and my actual business name is, and it's a mouthful, is Envision Impression Management Limited. But I trade under the name Kathy Ennis because of the whole brand identification thing as much as anything else. So, and also when you're looking for to name a company, and you want to get a URL, unless your name is John Smith or Fred Blogs, likely that your name is going to be very unique. So if your URL, your website, your email extension, etc., is your name, then it's likely to do good things for your search engine optimization, if nothing else.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Okay. So going back in time, let's dig into your past.
yes.
What was your last job before you started doing your own thing?
Um, my last job was running something called the membership support unit for an organisation called the Chartered Institute of Information Professionals. Library and Information Professionals, or sorry, I'm a librarian by background, and I forgot the librarians. Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals.
You like these long, complicated names, Kathy.
It's known as CILIP. It's the UK body that looks after the interests of library and information workers in the UK, and they have quite a large overseas contingent as well.
So how did you go from there to your first little steps into heading towards the Kathy Ennis brand?
Well, my background, as I said, I'm my first profession and my second degree actually was in library and information studies. And when I qualified, I spent most of my career working in further and higher education. And in that environment, I managed libraries, learning resources, but I also taught students things, information literacy, how to access information, utilize it to the best of their ability. So I trained as a teacher as well. And about 15 years into my career, I applied for a job at the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, and I got it. And I spent about 10 years there working not at the coalface of the profession, but with people who were at the coalface of the profession. And now, Georgette, your background is accountancy, okay? And one of the things we know about lots of professions is that they have a stereotype. And accountancy is one of them. It's all men, white men in grey suits. Okay, and in librarianship, the stereotype is spinster women who wear glasses, wear pearls, brogues, and live with a cat. And one of the things that fascinated me was this concept of how we communicate visually. And because I was working in the library and information field, and I was helping people with their careers, and there was a certain amount of mentoring, career advice, casework, lots of activity around supporting members and potential members, it struck me that there was something that people could do on an individual basis to uh, break that stereotype. So I became very interested in how we communicate externally. And one of the things that prompted me to do was to, of all strange things, while I was still working full time, to go off and train as an image consultant. because personally I'd had some image consultancy services and they had changed my career path. Once I started implementing those ideas, I got better jobs, I got asked to speak at conferences. It had an effect on how people perceived me. And I thought there must be something in this. So I went off and I trained. And still, while I was working full time, I set up as a sole trader on the side, offering image consultancy services to at the weekends to men, women, organisations. The thing is that it actually started to take over, and over a few years, what I did was I cut down the number of days a week I was working, and I allowed the business to start taking hold.
Mm.
And during that time as well, my perceptions changed, and it moved from image consultancy into the concept of impression management and personal branding. So the idea that you can break down barriers or communicate effectively if you understand the situations you're finding yourself in and you present yourself in the way that that situation calls for. It's not overly complicated when you look at it closely, because it's thinking strategically about what your audience is expecting to see. So the way you behave and dress at a funeral is not the way you'll behave and dress if you go to a wedding. And it's understanding in business that if you are dealing with a particular type of client who has a particular type of need, you can actually present yourself in a particular way that will allow communication to start effectively and easily and cut out any barriers. So that's what started to happen. I got busier. I started working in corporate environments, doing some stuff around dress codes and things like that, to the extent where I did take redundancy when it was offered and set out on my own. The idea then was to start a training company, which I did. At that time, I worked under the name of Envision Training. So Envision Impression Management has always been there in the background. But that was just around about the time we were really hard hit by the recession. And I got very hard hit by the retraction of corporate budgets for training. And so I then had to go and reinvent myself. So that's another bit of the story. So I don't know whether you want to ask me any questions about that.
I knew you'd have. I knew you'd make a great guest. Just knowing half your story. So, as you said, you got quite hit by the recession, as did we all. What techniques or strategies did you employ at that time, and maybe still do, to make sure you still got customers or continue to get customers? Because I tend to find that a lot of people I've spoken to who were trading during those times had to reinvent themselves, as you say, and still use some of those techniques, and may never have discovered those techniques had there not been a recession, which is quite fascinating. For some businesses, a recession actually improved their momentum and their resourcefulness. So how did that affect you, and what did you and do you use to bring customers in the door?
Well, it's interesting because I started business while I was still working full time. And then when things were going well, I was offered redundancy, and I had a really nice redundancy package. I'm the first person to hold my hand up and say that as far as the money in my business was concerned, and as far as real business activity was concerned, I was just playing around because I didn't have to make money because I had a regular income coming in. And the fact that my business never made much of a profit, broke even most of the time, was not particularly a worry for me because I was earning a really good salary. So what you could say is it was a hobby that paid a little bit of money. So when I took the redundancy, I had a nice cushion for about a year to 18 months where I was still in that state, and things were starting to get tighter, but it was okay because, you know, I had a business, and I will put that into inverted commas. When the recession hit fully, and when there wasn't anything left really in the bank account except for hot air, I think that's when the thing really hit me, and the realization that what I had been doing for some years previous was just playing around and didn't really know what it was that I should be doing in order to bring money into the business. So I had a lean period, very, very lean, where I was still getting bits and pieces of work coming in almost by chance rather than doing anything specific. And it was at that time where I had to sit and think, well, if I want to make this a business, what does that actually mean? And the interesting thing that I found was, and not being a numbers person at all, is what it was actually the numbers. And I'm a very basic mathematician. I can add up and I can divide and I can multiply, but don't ask me to work out the corners of a triangle. And it was the realization that when you get down to basics in business, there are things that you have to be doing behind the stuff that you love, and the numbers have to be able to add up, and that the amount of money coming in on a regular basis needs to be more than the amount of money going out on a regular basis, and you need to know how much that amount of money going out is. And so in that very lean period, that's what I set out to do, is to learn what that actually meant for my business. So I continued with the training. As I said, I still had some clients and I was still getting money coming in, but then I started actually to work on the business. Now my strap line now, if you want to put it that way, is I say let's get your business working, but what sits behind that is this concept of the missing link between passion and profit is planning. And for me, that was the thing, is that I loved doing what I did, but I didn't put any of the business planning or anything in the background. I was just hoping that it was going to happen by osmosis. And some of the time that does happen, but if you want a business, you have to actually put the planning in. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started to do, and things did start to pick up. And interestingly, one of the things that started to happen was that people that I knew through networking, and I've always done lots of public speaking and those kinds of things. So people that I knew through those environments used to phone or email and say, could we meet for a cup of coffee? I've got a bit of a problem and I know that you do something with this. Can you give me a hand? So I'd meet them for a cup of coffee, and they'd explain what their issue was, and I'd grab out a piece of paper and I'd draw out on the piece of paper, well, why don't you do this and this and this, and have you thought about that, and why don't you do that? And they'd go off and do whatever it was, and things would start to pick up, and I'd have had a cup of coffee. Okay. So I had loads and loads of, it was busy work. I had loads of appointments in my diary, but those appointments weren't translating into money in the bank. And I thought, hang on, there's something going on here. Still bringing in some money through the training and speaking and various other bits and pieces, but not as much because my diary was full. So the remorphication of myself, or the change of myself into something else, was that I decided to put a term around this, and I decided to say that it was mentoring. And that people who had problems and wanted to find a methodology of getting around them, under them, over them, through them, whatever you might want to say, I would sit with them and we would discuss what the problems were. We'd together come up with a strategy to deal with that problem, and then I would act as the friendly kick up the behind to make sure that it was actually happening. So and charge them for it. And so that's basically what I do now. Most of the time is I work one-to-one with people, or, you know, because I tend to deal a lot with micros or one-person operations, it does tend to be one person, but sometimes it's two or three in the company. And that's what we will do, is sit down, what's the problem? Let's find a solution to that problem. Let's now put into an action plan in to solve that problem, I'll keep on top of you to make sure that you're going along the right path, or help you if things don't go right. And for that service, you will pay this amount of money. And still do the training. Got a session I'm running tomorrow at the Berkeley Enterprise Centre, and I still do public speaking and all of those kinds of things. But it's very much about getting people to recognise that if they want a successful business, they have to do business, not just the thing they love doing.
Did you find you got much pushback when you shifted the emphasis from let's go for a coffee to, well, now it's mentoring and it's paid, especially for
Oh
those who
yeah.
knew you, and if you did, what did you do to overcome? Did you just sort of forget? Because a lot of the time, when I had that, the people that were already in my orbit, I kind of thought, well, they're already used to me in a certain light, so I just gonna have to do it with new people, and it was just easy. But how did you overcome that?
It basically the same really, and it was hard because as you said, we met some time ago, and we've mixed in the same networks, and we've known quite a few of the same people, and they were used to getting me free.
Mm.
And now I was having to say it's going to cost you money. So it was hard, but the fact is, in business, you have to grow a bit of a shell, and you have to recognise that if I go to Tesco this afternoon and say, put all my shopping on the trolley or on the conveyor belt and come to the checkout, and the girl asks me for the money, and I say, oh, haven't really got it at the moment, perhaps I can pay you in 6 months time once I start getting some money into my bank account, they're probably going to have me arrested. So it comes down to the fact, and I'm quite open about this, I have to have money in my bank account in order to pay my bills. And if people can't afford to pay me to do what I do for them, I'm quite happy to work out some kind of payment plan, but they're not getting it for nothing, because it's taken me 30 years to actually get the knowledge that's in my head, and that's what people are paying for. I have, do I have tangible products? Yeah, I've got a book and various things like that, but actually what most people are doing is they're paying me for my knowledge and my experience, and that's cost me a lot to develop. And therefore it's going to cost people money to actually access it.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So obviously you offer mentoring, and I do make the differentiation between that and coaching,
Yeah.
to some degree. Who advised you? Who would you regard as having been a mentor or coach to you?
um there are a couple of people. I One person I've worked very closely with is a lovely guy, I think you know as well, Sir Henry Boyle.
Hmm.
He's done quite a lot for me. I think also there have been some great people I've met through networking. Another lady that I would give a shout out for is a lady called Stella Femi, who runs the Athena Network in the
Stella's
area that
amazing.
I live and work in. And there have been a whole, I mean, even down to I remember you ran a session once that I came along to, where you spoke about the money coming into your business and how you should apportion it, and the idea about putting a third in here and a third in there and a third in there, so that everybody gets paid and everybody's happy. All of those kinds of things. And I can't. Henry's the one person I've worked with who over a year we actually did some really solid work together, but there have been so many people along the way that have just given those little snippets, those little bits of help and support. Another great person who's always helped me is somebody called Tamsin Fox Davies, and I always definitely give her a thumbs up, because what she doesn't know about marketing, nobody does.
And to go a bit deeper than that, who did you turn to, or who kept you going in the times when inevitably you had enough?
Oh, my husband,
Mm.
most definitely. He's been an absolute rock and a really solid person to help and support me along the way, because like everybody, most of us are walking around with some kind of facade, and what the public see is not necessarily what everybody sees at home. So he's seen me when things have not necessarily been going well, and has always been the person there to chivvy me up. So yeah, definitely.
So somebody wanted to work with you, or say they weren't even ready yet.
Mm.
What three things? It's always three, isn't it? What three things? I don't know why. I'm just going to do three. Would you advise to start off with? Well, Kathy, I hear what you say, and I agree. You know, my brand and my appearance and my image and my communication
Yeah,
skills all need to be honed, and I kind of don't know where to start because I know what you mean, but
yeah.
tangibly, what three things should I start doing or audit about myself first?
Well, if we're talking about you as a person and how you are using, say, things like brand or personal brand to communicate with a client base, the first and biggest thing is don't attempt to be what you're not. And because as human beings, we are very, very adept, more than we know we are, at actually sniffing out incongruency. And so the fact is that if you are um, a certain type of person, then that's a certain type of person that you need to show. So don't attempt to put some kind of gloss on the top. Be the best person that you actually are, because that is the one thing that makes you very, very unique. Don't attempt to copy. I don't even like the concept of modeling somebody. What I actually prefer is if there are people out there that you admire, is what is it that you admire in them, and what have you got in yourself that is, you could say, that you admire, or that mirrors that admiration. So it's not this person talks like this person walks like this. It's like, what is it in their essence, I suppose, that makes them who they are, and how can you use that yourself? So it is about being true to yourself. It's ensuring that if you've got a business, that you really understand what brand means. And brand does not mean logo. It does not mean actually going to a graphic designer and saying, oh, I'm running this kind of business, create me a picture. Because brand is far deeper than that.
Mm.
So I would definitely get that. And I would generally say that before you do all of those things, is you actually really question your business,
Okay.
because the quite often what I deal with is what I call cart before horse situations. And I'll work with business owners who have done what they feel they need to do in order to have a business. They will have decided on the name of their business. They will have purchased a URL. They will have had a website created. They will have a business card. They will be going networking. They will be doing all of the stuff that seems to be what business is about. But what they haven't actually done is ask themselves the four key questions about their business, which is, number one, what am I selling? And what you're selling is always the outputs, not the inputs. So nobody is interested in what you do. They're only interested in what they get once you've done it. So you have to be very, very clear about what your outcome is. The next thing you have to be clear about is who you're selling it to. Because you can have a brilliant product, but if you're attempting to sell it to the wrong customer, you're not going to sell anything. Or you might have right customer but the wrong product and the same outcome. Okay. The third question, and quite often when people start businesses, they do those two things. They're very clear about what they're selling, and they know, and I'll put that in inverted commas, who they're selling it to. But that's based on assumption. What they don't necessarily do is step 3, which is actually go out and find people who they have identified as their potential customers and ask them whether they want what they're selling.
That's scary though, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is. I mean, because you've decided to sell something that you love. That's why I say, the word passion comes up constantly when you hear people talking about business. This is something I'm passionate about. Fine, you're passionate about it. Doesn't mean anybody wants to buy it. So you have to get out and you have to ask people. And this is primary research. This is talking to people who you have identified as being your potential clients. And the fourth question that you put in there is, once you've identified them, once you've spoken to them, the question you have to ask them is, how much are you going to pay for it? Because you might put a price ticket on it that your customers that you've identified would not pay, or you might have underpriced it, which often happens. So you want to sell it for 50 quid, but they're willing to pay £500 for it. So I would go right back to that beginning. I would not go anywhere near a website, a URL, naming my business, anything. I wouldn't have any assumptions about what my business is going to be until I've fully answered those 4 questions. And if I can answer those 4 questions, then I can put a business plan together, and then I can put a cash flow forecast together, both of which are crystal ball gazing. Okay.
Guesswork, my darling, guesswork.
Absolutely. There's no mistake, or it's not a coincidence that it's called a forecast. It's because it's a guess. But your job, once you've answered those 4 questions, once you've got that clear, once you've got your product or your service or whatever it is you're selling worked out for the people you want to sell it to at the prices they're prepared to pay for it, your guesswork is based on data. And therefore, that plan and that forecast should be based on that data. And your job through the next year is to actually make that thing happen.
Yeah.
Which is why it doesn't go in a drawer. Which is why it's reviewed. And when you're at startup, you should be reviewing it on a weekly basis, because you'll have time, because you will not be inundated with customers.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I usually find that it's only by about year 3 that you've got enough real data in your business to be able to draw proper conclusions from it, particularly the financial ones. Because you'll see the ebb and flow of money through the business over that period of time. Year 1 is basically, this is just me getting my feet wet. Year 2 is a bit of solidifying. By year 3, things are sort of working the way they should be working.
So, looking back on your journey, what sticks? Could be one thing in your mind that you possibly regret. Now people say, "Oh, I never regret anything." Well, I do. I'm not afraid to admit. Anything you regret or would just rather forget that it ever occurred?
Oh God, there are so many. Which one to choose? The biggest regret, and this comes through in terms of what I do now, and I hold my hands up to my clients and potential clients and say this, is that they're benefiting from my mistakes. So I've made all of those mistakes, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so determined that my clients won't make them. And it's the whole thing about assumptions. When I look back on the biggest mistakes that I've made, every single one of them has been me assuming that something was going to happen, or that the person I was speaking to understood things in the same way that I did, just because we spoke the same words. But I've found later that what they thought they were saying and what I thought I was saying were completely different. And I think one of the classic examples, I think, is my first website. And the situation that happened there is, I I told you I'm a librarian. I'm an information professional. I worked with an organisation that is based around that kind of industry, and I worked in that industry for 25 years or so. Um, so when I started talking to somebody about the creation of my first website, I told them what I wanted. What I didn't realise is that they had that they heard different things than I had told them, and I just left them to go ahead and do it. And I basically ended up with a white elephant. It didn't do what I wanted it to do, and actually, because I hadn't asked the question properly, it cost me about 4 times more than I expected it to, which meant that I had to keep it for about 3 years because I just couldn't afford
Yeah.
to pay for a new one.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest. I rushed into it. I didn't ask the right questions. I made assumptions. I didn't keep my eye on the ball. I didn't check in with them on a regular basis, and I didn't question them fully enough. And it was a big chunk of money. And it took me a long time to actually get over that. So this whole thing about asking questions, and that old saying about assume makes an ass of you and me. That's the biggest thing.
In fact, it's funny you said that, because websites, I don't hear so much these days, but were always the thing that you could hear some real horror stories of what people paid for them, and you're thinking, wow. And people who
Well,
could
this
still
had 3
afford it.
zeros on the end,
I know, yeah.
and
And it
it didn't
didn't
have
do
a
it.
one. Didn't have a one at the front either. So
Oh, wow.
it was a lot of money, and it's and you're coming back to what we were saying earlier about networking and the people that you meet as well, is that's the place where you're going to find people that you can trust to do these things. But never ever jump at the first person. It's a big chunk of money, and it's your baby, your business, and you've got to nurture it, and you've got to really, really, really trust, and you've got to really, really understand when you ask people to do something for you, for your business, exactly what you're going to get as the outcome. So because it can affect your bottom line really, really strongly, making assumptions.
Yeah. And on the flip side, what success do you think back on that you think, yeah, I nailed that?
Oh, goodness me. I think I suppose one of the nicest and most rewarding times I've had was for a number of years I was a trainer with an organisation called Prime, and Prime was it was the Prince's Initiative for Mature Enterprise, and it was a Prince of Wales charity. It was the Prince's Trust, but for 50 plus people. So it was working with people over the age of 50 who were considering starting a business for the first time. So they were people who perhaps had taken redundancy, or taken early retirement, or those kinds of things, and recognise that 50 or even 60 is not old these days, and that you've probably got 30 to 40 years in front of you. So you want to be doing something that you love, but you want to be making a bit of money at the same time. And I worked with that organisation until it ceased to exist a couple of years ago. I worked with them for 3 years, and took quite a few groups of people over the age of 50 through the process of understanding what business is, writing a business plan, and quite a few of them I've kept in contact with. Some of them I've worked with in a mentoring capacity since then, and quite a few of them have gone on to really make a mark and to have really successful businesses, and that has been absolutely fantastic.
Oh, okay. So moving on from that and going along the same path, what are you seeing in the business world or in the world in general that really fires you up and you feel you'd like to, if you had the resources available, that you'd love to fix?
Love to fix. Well, this might sound a bit back to front, but I do think that it's very easy in the UK for people to start a business. Basically, they only have to phone up the HMRC and say, look, I started a business today. And then the HMRC in a year's time will say, okay, well, give me your annual return and we'll tell you how much, if anything, you owe us. And I think that's brilliant. But I also think it's really dangerous because just because you're brilliant at cross stitch doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a fantastic cross stitch company. Okay, and it can cause you frustrations and hardship. So one of the things for me, I would love more people to recognise that business has skills, and that in order to have a successful business, they need to develop those skills, and that they need to recognise that the 80-20 rule rules the universe, and that 80% of your time needs to be in business and 20% of your time needs to be doing the stuff you love, and not the other way round. And that, doing things like keeping in contact with your customers, having some kind of customer database, all of those boring things that people don't want to do is, I'd love to see that. I'd also like, as I said, I worked with Prime for 3 years, and personally, I think that we've got massively unfulfilled potential in people over the age of 50 in terms of entrepreneurship, and that lots of emphasis is given to the younger generation, which it should be, because they're our future and be paying our pensions, hopefully. But I think that this recognition that people have got a skill set, that they don't necessarily want to stay in employment forever, and anyway that's precarious on a daily basis, and who knows what's going to happen over the next few months, considering the referendum last week. That I'd love to see something offered for people on a national level over the age of 50 to get them thinking about entrepreneurship and setting out on their own. For me, that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I agree. I must admit, before I got further up in years, I never imagined that entrepreneurship was for people over a certain age. And then I started doing a lot more higher level networking with people who had established businesses, or who had really good corporate careers but were now transitioning. And it didn't occur to me at first, because you're just with people and you're just talking. And then, I don't know why, I looked around one room one day, there was quite a few people, and I realised that actually, because I'd gotten used to becoming a bit of one of the older people in a room, gone from being a younger. And I looked around and I realised I'm a bit of a youngster compared to quite a lot of people in here. And I'm thinking, wow, you're 60 odd and you're trying to work out what you want to do as a business. Work out, not even. And I'm like, whoa. And I was so impressed by that, because, our generation, you hit 50, that's, it's downhill from there. And yet, further up the scale, age-wise, and people were talking about whether they should take their pension out and use that to fund. And I was like, horrified, but, the risk taker. But it showed, and I thought, we have really come such a long way. But as you say, even at that age, there's still a lot of naivety as to what it means, even though we did so well in corporate life. You come out, it's such a, because I'm completely messed up with my first time working for myself, because I'd always had an accounts department to turn to and an HR department, and now it was all me, and almighty screw up. Unreal. And so you're absolutely
that's the thing, is that, and this is why people need help, because when you come out of employment, there have been things there. However brilliant you are at what you do, generally there have been other people doing bits and pieces that quite often you didn't even realise the extent of what it was that they did. And now it's all down to you. Every single bit of it is down to you. And the fact is that if you forget a bit of it, or you don't like doing a bit of it, or you don't know how to do a bit of it, that's pivotal, because that could be the difference between you being successful or
Hmm.
not. So yeah, and I think you're right. It's people. I think in the UK generally we have a really good work ethic, and the fact is that you work for in a corporate environment, 40-50 hours a week is devoted to either in work or working and getting to and from work. And then somebody says, oh, thanks very much, and perhaps we might see you again one day, and then all of a sudden there's nothing.
Mm.
And for the first 2 weeks it must be lovely, because it's like, well, it's like having a holiday. But the fact is that if you've then got, you can see 30 years stretching in front of you, uh, it's not that you don't want to spend time with family and all of this and that and the other, but that that brain power is still there, and that
Yes.
that 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 ability to work is still there. And even if people decide that they're going to do something completely different, um, but to supplement their pension or whatever it is, it's about keeping your brain as active as possible
Mm.
in that period.
Mm.
So yeah, and I think I think we've got masses of opportunity to do that kind of thing, but we do have to recognise that just because we are brilliant at something in the workplace, we might not necessarily be brilliant at it when we set up in
Yeah,
business.
totally.
So yeah, key
Totally.
thing.
So, Kath, well, you've been in education today, my dear.
Thank you.
You've done my job. So, if people want to know more about you,
hmm
where do they go?
They can go to my website, which is very simple. It's kathyennis.co.uk. As I said, if you use your name, it's much easier for people to find you. They can come and find me on Twitter. I'm Kathy Ennis on Twitter. On Facebook, I'm Kathy Ennis, Your Brand Is You. So they can come and find me there. But if you type Kathy Ennis into Google, generally I come out somewhere very close to the top. I think there's a lady in Colorado or somewhere who's got the same name as me, but
Really?
I think so, but we are different. We are different people. If people are in and around the London area, I quite often do sessions at the City Business Library, which is near St Paul's, and yeah, I'm generally there once a month talking about something or other. That's part of my give back. It's not a paid gig. I
Yeah,
go
no,
in and
yeah.
I run sessions for them there, and they're really good fun, and I enjoy meeting people there. And one of the things that's coming up actually this Friday, I'm running a webinar with a colleague. We wrote a book a couple of years ago called How to Spot a Dinosaur, which is a self-help book, and it's about personal development and those kinds of things. And we're running a webinar on Friday to explore some of the things that are in the book. And if people are interested, it's very simple. It's a bit.ly link that they need. So it's bit.ly, then a / dino, DINO, with an uppercase D, webinar with an uppercase W. And they're more than welcome, it's free, more than welcome to log on. And if they can't attend actually on Friday at 2 o'clock, anybody who signs up for it will get a copy of the slides, or they'll get a copy of the webinar. We're recording it and we can send that out to them.
And what if the date has passed completely for signing up? Is there
If the
anywhere else
dates,
they
if
can watch any of your webinars?
I'm going to be putting it on my website,
Okay.
but also if they can't find it, drop me an email and I will stick it into a Dropbox or onto an email or something for them, and send it
Okay.
out to them.
Oh, fine.
So
Yeah. Because
absolutely
the odds are the majority of people that when they hear this, it would have long passed because these
right.
shows just are going on and people are finding them all the time and so on.
Okay.
So it'd
Yeah.
be a shame if they if they couldn't get to hear it if they came
Yeah.
after the fact. So that's brilliant. Oh, great. Okay, lovely,
But
lovely.
anybody's got any questions at any time, if they just either use the contact form on my website or just send me an email. Again, email simple. It's kathy@kathyennis.co.uk. Just drop me a line and say that they heard me speaking on here. If they've got a question, I'll do my best to answer it for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
It's been emotional.
Hurrah!
And there you have it. I hope that was useful to you. If it was, please do share it with others who you think might find all those little nuggets from Kathy useful. And don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to know more about how to manage, grow, and save your money, go over to financialgymforbusiness.com and you'll get more of my tips, updates, and giveaways. Remember, you don't have to be a financial expert to be the financial leader in your business. Thank you so much for stopping by. See you later. Bye.